All right, this is episode 26 of the Dandin and RJ Machismo podcast. My partner RJ Machismo will not be here today, but tonight we have a special guest all the way from the DMV. We have Chase Hughes. He is the Washington Wizards writer slash reporter for NBC Sports Washington. Chase, what a privilege to have you here tonight.
It's a privilege to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So, I'm sure you've been very busy considering, it's already the tail end of the All-Star, start of All-Star weekend. And then I'm sure you were working very hard last night. So what were your thoughts on the Wizards-Clippers victory, 119-117?
Well, I thought it was a big win for the Wizards. Even though Paul George and Marcus Morris were out, there was still Kawhi Leonard, still Lou Williams. It's still a really good Clippers team. And, if you consider the alternative, if the Wizards had lost that game, they would have gone into the All-Star break losers of 3 straight games. But now they get to go in on a win. They've won 8 out of 11. And now they've got wins over 4 of the top 5 teams in the Western Conference. So, you kind of avenged that loss you had about a week prior to the same Clippers team. And you did it with your defense. Certainly it helped not having George and Morris out there, but the Wizards really locked down defensively in the second and the third quarter. They held the Clippers to, I think it was about a 5-minute stretch without a field goal. There was a 21-2 run at one point. And then, of course, the win was capped off by an amazing rebound by Russell Westbrook in the closing seconds.
That was crazy. So like the big debate was like who caught that rebound? Was it Westbrook or was it Beal? Because I think Beal would just run off the clock, right?
Yeah, so Beal technically got credit for the rebound, but there's got to be something that Russell Westbrook can get out of that. It was also, he was 1 rebound away from a triple-double, so I feel like the tiebreaker should have been given to him and just give him the triple-double and the game-winning rebound. Because then it's like, what do you call it? It's like game-winning deflection?
Yeah.
I don't know. It kind of left all of us in an awkward spot.
Right. It wouldn't be 9.5 rebounds, right? So you can't round it off to a 10.
Exactly.
All right, Chase. So we're going to start off, with some questions with you, Chase. I really appreciate you having on tonight. So tell us more a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from Northern Virginia. I grew up in Crystal City area and then went to high school in Fairfax at Woodson High School, and then went down to college in South Carolina at Charleston, and luckily got an internship at what was then known as CSN Washington. And luckily I've been there ever since, just kind of slowly working my way up, covering hockey, covering baseball, now covering basketball, and, covered the Wizards. My first season was 2016-17. That was really exciting. The 3 years after that weren't all that exciting, but now this year I feel like the Wizards are bound to do some pretty cool things, probably get to the playoffs and maybe make some noise in the Eastern Conference. So that's kind of how my career has gone. I'm just happy to be covering a good Wizards team now.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, you pretty much have, you've had everything, being a part of like the Nationals, you're saying that the Capitals and now with the Wizards. So it's nice that you're from the DMV and then, you went away for school and then came back here. So it was meant for you to, to be covering sports.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up a fan of all DC sports teams. I'm still a huge fan of the Washington football team because I've never covered them, so that it's never been affected by that. When you do get close to a team or covering a team, it does affect your fandom a little bit, but I've kept my distance there. But, I grew up a Wizards fan and a fan of the Bullets. Like I used to watch them on HTS when it was Rod Strickland and Calbert Cheaney and, Juwan Howard, Chris Webber, all them. And so I feel like even though I'm not like a fan of the team anymore, I cover them and I understand where the fans are coming from because like I went through a lot of those highs and lows growing up, and I just understand that Wizards fans have been through quite a bit over the years, and a lot of them are kind of cynical because of that. So even when things are going well, I feel like every Wizards fan is just suspicious that there's something around the corner that's going to happen that's not good for the Wizards.
Yeah, that's like being a Washington Wizard. So might ask you like who was your favorite Washington Bullets / Wizards player, like I guess idolizing or growing up?
Rod Strickland was definitely that guy for me. I just loved his ball handling, his passing. I always thought he was so underrated. And, even though they traded Rasheed Wallace for him, and that trade is going to always be viewed by what Rasheed Wallace became, Rod Strickland was the point guard for the best years the Bullets played in my childhood, And then, I was a pretty big fan when they had Gilbert Arenas and Larry Hughes and all them. And I really liked, of course, Gilbert, but I also really liked Caron Butler. Once Larry Hughes left and Caron Butler was the small forward, I was a big fan of his game and his story. And it was just crazy to end up actually working with him and like doing TV with him. That was pretty wild because it was just like 10 years earlier. He was my favorite player essentially. Who was your favorite player back then?
Oh, so Bullets, I was a big fan of Chris Webber. So,
yeah.
When he was with Michigan with the whole Fab Five, it was like a dream come true for me because like it was nice. We had Juwan Howard back in like 95, and then when we traded Tom Gugliotta, it was like a godsend. Like, oh my goodness, like the Fab Two. And then I was mad that Scott Skiles was with the team where he couldn't give the number 4. Then he went away, and then he wore the number 4. And I think it was unfortunate that things didn't happen, or he didn't stay as long as he wanted because they had something great going on. With the whole marijuana thing, the whole drug incident, and the whole choking incident as well. And then my favorite Wizard is Gilbert Arenas. I think, in my opinion, that he's like the greatest Wizard that has captivated the city in the span of 5
better
years.
Than Wall and better than what Beal's doing right now.
Actually, Beal might be Beal is actually surpassing Arenas, but I think as far as like entertainment, Gilbert had he had like the buzzer beaters.
Yeah, he was tough to beat in that regard.
Yeah, but
he had the quotes, he had the nicknames.
Hibachi, yeah. I mean, those are 2 different eras, right? So it's kind of hard to compare, but they are great in their own way. But I always appreciate Gilbert, and I actually appreciate Bradley Beal even more, being loyal to the Wizards, and hopefully they can build around him.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like Chris Webber, there's been, and we mentioned Rasheed Wallace too. The Wizards and Bullets have let go of guys at the wrong time, right before they became great players.
Mm-hmm.
And Bradley Beal's already a great player, but I feel like that needs to be kept in mind. All the fans that like argue that they should trade him, well, just think about how you felt when they traded those other guys.
Yeah, especially with the whole backlash with with Wall being traded, and then we'll touch that later on with these questions. So, yeah, I mean that definitely brought like memory lane for both of us as Bullet/Wizards fans.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's great. All right, so as you were stating, that you graduated at the College of Charleston, double majoring in political science and communication. So, what decided for you to get into the sports media business?
Well, I went to college and studied political science, as you mentioned, because I wanted to go to law school and maybe end up working on like political campaigns. But through studying it, I realized I didn't want to do it, and I heard someone make a great comment. It's like, when you study something in college, you either find out that you want to do it, or sometimes it's valuable to find out that you don't want to do it. So that's kind of the group I was in. And toward the end of my time in school, I realized I kind of wanted to work in sports or in sports television. So I was able to, get a foot in the door. Luckily, I got the email structure and found out the name of the boss of the website at CSN Washington and sent him an email. And, I noticed that they had just redesigned their website. So it was kind of fortuitous timing. And luckily I was able to get in, but there was definitely some luck involved, and also just I think on me being willing to take a shot. And that's always just kind of been my philosophy to at least try, because then you can at least live with the fact that you tried. If you don't try, then I feel like there's a certain element of regret there that I don't know. I wanted to avoid in this situation, and luckily it ended up working out for me.
So you were almost an attorney, but your hidden passion, that's why you double majored, was communication, where that led to the sports media business. So I think it all worked out for you, Chase.
Yeah, I think it did. I was a sports writer in high school. I was like the editor of the sports section of my high school newspaper, but at the time I didn't want to do that. So that's why I kind of went into a different direction, but then I fell back on that experience. And luckily I was able to get in at a time in the industry and at a time in my company where, I feel like I was able to sort of learn on the job and for a while and make some mistakes. Maybe the same opportunity wouldn't have been presented to me if I came out of school right now. So definitely a lot of luck involved in my journey.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah. So with you started off your career as a part-time digital producer for CSN Mid-Atlantic in 2010, working yourself up as a Capitals and Nationals digital producer. What were the challenges you faced covering both teams?
Well, the challenge certainly covering the Capitals was that I didn't have a great base of knowledge on hockey going into that. It was kind of, I was at the website at CSN, and I noticed that, there was an opportunity for me to start writing if I wrote about the Capitals, and maybe get on air if I was talking about the Capitals. So really, really learned and studied the sport, and kind of stuck to what I knew and didn't try to get into what I didn't know. And so it was just the challenge of, learning hockey and being able to talk about it. It's a difficult sport to evaluate for sure. There's not very many statistics. Sometimes it could be a 1-0 game, and that one goal can happen in the last like 2 minutes. So how do you evaluate the other 58 minutes in a game? Baseball, just the hours, man. Covering baseball is definitely, in terms of this industry, one of the most labor intensive things that you can do, because they're 10-hour days on a minimum, and they basically never have off days. So just the pure tonnage of hours that you have to log as a baseball writer, honestly, since it makes everything else that I've done seem easy.
Yeah.
Like, especially because like you go from baseball to basketball, and there's like legitimately half the games, and you're at the games for a shorter period of time, and there's no rain delays, and the games are timed. So it's just like I got all this free time back and was able to apply it and still work really hard, but just apply it to other things and be more creative with what I do.
Yeah. So compared to like what hockey has 100 games and baseball has 162 games compared to an 82 game season, that's
Yeah,
just like half.
it's crazy. 162 game season, and that they take like batting practice for hours and hours, and post game takes longer. I mean, it's fun, but it's very draining, and something that, I feel like most people can't do for more than just a few years at a time.
Yeah, that's definitely a grind. So yeah, I mean, glad that you got into the NBA industry and covering the Wizards. So that's awesome. So from a content producer, you transition yourself into a Washington Nationals beat writer from 2012 to 2016. Which players did you enjoy covering during that time, and what were your favorite memories?
Oh, which players did I enjoy covering? I would definitely say Bryce Harper. He gets a bad rap. Is a lot of people think he's like a jerk, or he's self-involved. I always found him to be really pleasant to deal with. I mean, he gave me great quotes. He was always super down to earth, and he was just an amazing player to watch. In 2015 when he won the MVP, it's one of the greatest individual seasons I've been able to cover. Probably the greatest individual baseball season I covered, even though there were quite a few with the Nationals, like Max Scherzer winning a Cy Young, other guys winning Silver Sluggers and being in the MVP race. But Bryce Harper in 2015 was just on a completely different level. And then Ian Desmond, he was their shortstop. He was a really nice guy, really down to earth, always great with the media. So those two would be the players that I would highlight. Favorite memories would definitely be covering the crazy playoff games, most of them that they lost. But Jason Worth's homer in Game 4 of the 2012 NLDS, that was a really fun night to cover. Game 5 when they lost to the Cardinals and they were up before Drew Storen blew it in the 9th inning. That was a wild game to cover. And then I covered 2 no-hitters, one by Max Scherzer, one by Jordan Zimmermann. 20 strikeout game by Max Scherzer, that was incredible. But probably the first no-hitter, if I had to pick like one game that was my favorite to cover, probably Jordan Zimmermann's no-hitter is on the final day of the 2014 regular season. If I remember correctly, they were playing the Marlins, and Jordan Zimmermann pitched obviously an amazing game. He threw a no-hitter, but the way it ended with Steven Souza Jr. having to leap in the outfield and into the left center field gap and save the day with that catch. It was something I'll never forget. And even though I technically covered better performances, even pitching performances, like 20 strikeouts, that was technically a better game, or Max Scherzer being 1 strike away from a perfect game, that was technically better. Just the way that ended was so memorable. And it was the first no-hitter I ever covered.
Yeah, I remember it. Steven Souza, like I think he did a over the shoulder catch, right? And it was just insane. Like everyone just erupted, and then Jordan Zimmerman got the Gatorade bath and everything.
Yeah, it was such a crazy. The way it developed was so crazy because like Steven Souza only played because it was the final day of the regular season, and they were just rotating in all the players on their roster. So it was like, if this was 3 days earlier, then he probably wouldn't have been playing in left field at that time.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, what was I think that was the year that they played the Giants, wasn't it? It was like that 15-inning game.
Yeah, so yeah, that's why. So they had everything locked up, and there was no reason to play their regular players. So they were just trying to make sure that they didn't get any injuries because they wanted to save everyone for that playoff series. And yeah, you're talking about be game 2 of that series. They played 18 innings. I was at that one too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So like what? It ended that game like what, 2:00 in the morning, 1:00, 1:30 Eastern time?
Yeah, I want to say it ended at like 12:30 or like close to 1, but it had started earlier. I want to say it started at like 5:00 or something. And it was like basically a 6-hour game.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. I think it was just they were just running out of. I mean, they were using like starter pitchers already, and it was just like one thing after the other. But yeah, I'm glad things happened in 2019 now, so they're good. Yeah, that's all right. So in your current role for NBC Sports Washington, covering the Washington Wizards, how important is maintaining good relationships with the organization, as well as your fellow colleagues at a professional level?
It's really important. When it comes to trying to break stories and gain access, that's usually what it comes down to is relationships that you have with players and agents and coaches and front office executives. So it's important, and it's become a tough part of the job now that everything is remote because you don't get to see people face to face in person. Networking, I've found that the best way to network is just to be able to talk to people and go up to them and ask them for their phone number. It's tough to do when you're just cold calling people. So that's definitely been important. And certainly, at our office, I feel like I've tried to just be super as nice as I can to everybody, no matter who they are. And you feel like if you just work hard and treat people right, then success will eventually find its way to you. But certainly that's important. But yeah, I mean, when you're trying to report on stories, relationships are the name of the game.
Yeah, like I see like you guys have a good camaraderie, like you and Chris Miller and the other Drew Gooden, those people are awesome. Like you guys like are pretty much kind of like you guys are kind of like buddies, like from college buddies. Like you guys, you guys a lot of ribbing, a lot of joking around, but at the same time when it comes to being on a serious level, you guys are all on point. So it's good that you guys have that good chemistry.
Yeah, I appreciate that because you never know when you're doing like one or the other too much. And like I'm a little self-conscious sometimes when on TV because I don't want to joke around too much. But then they make fun of me so much, I have to fight for myself,
Yeah. So it's kind of like Chris Miller would be like, hey, like let's lighten it up a little bit. Let's talk about this topic or that topic. So it's kind of like you're just following what how the flow of things are, and at the same time you just want to just just trying to go with the flow kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Jason Smith loves making fun of me. So does Brennan Haywood. So sometimes, yeah, they start it. I don't start it, but once they start it, I have to engage.
Okay.
Because if I'm on TV and they make fun of me and I don't push back, the viewer's probably gonna be like, well, why didn't he say anything?
Right. Like why? Like they're saying stuff and then he's not like justifying what he's saying. So yeah, it's just friendly barber talk, sports kind of thing. Like you're just talking shop with your buddies and just having good like sports debates, which is good and healthy.
For sure. Yeah, and you're always trying to find a balance when you're on TV talking about the Wizards. When things are going poorly, you want to be able to evaluate them fairly without taking any cheap shots. And the fans are really fired up. I'm sure you are after tough losses or after big wins, and you try to reflect that. So yeah, it's been fun, and it definitely is more fun when you're joking around with the people you're on TV with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely lightens up the mood no matter if they win or lose. Especially, they've been on a great tear right now, last month, which is much needed for this team. So definitely great. So next question for you, Chase. The duo of John Wall and Bradley Beal was considered the best stretch of success that the Wizards had in a long time. What factors prohibited in taking the next level, such as reaching the Eastern Conference Finals / NBA Finals?
I think injuries would probably be the biggest reason for that. They obviously 2016-17 was their best opportunity. Or you could go back a few years earlier than that when they were playing the Atlanta Hawks and they were up in that series and John Wall broke his wrist. So injuries prevented them from going to the conference finals that year. In 2016-17, they just kind of ran out of gas at the very end. They didn't get much at all from their bench that night. Bojan Bogdanovic, as good of a player as he's become since he left, gave them nothing that night. They really tightened their rotation, and John Wall in that game 7 just wasn't in good enough shape to be a factor in the fourth quarter. And it was something that he took into the offseason. He tried to really get in shape, and then his body just broke down. And Bradley Beal in the meantime ascended to become a star, if not a superstar. But John Wall just couldn't stay healthy, and you could never build on that 2016-17 season. I think they also made some mistakes personnel-wise. They gave Otto Porter a max contract, and that didn't end up working out as well as they would hope. The money they gave him was only going to be justified if he took another step in his development, kind of like John Wall did when he got his max deal, and so did Bradley Beal. And it just never happened for him, and injuries were partly to blame. So if they had let him go and maybe re-sign Bojan Bogdanovic, maybe they would have had a little bit more financial flexibility, but they ultimately had very little financial flexibility. And then John Wall got hurt, and he was on a supermax contract and was just basically a black hole on their salary cap, and they just didn't have enough to compete. So I think it was, in one word, I would say injuries, but also, of course, some mistakes made along the way in building their roster that limited their ability to compete outside of having that obstacle, which was John Wall's deal and his injuries.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Especially in my observations when John Wall was here, I think the most competent backup point guard we had was Andre Miller, and he was way past his prime. Yeah, he was good. He was good at posting up his lower smaller point guards and making some sound decisions. But I think the lack of a quality point guard and a lack of a shooting guard / swingman. I mean, he had Kelly Oubre, and you basically traded him for nothing for a way, past his prime Trevor Ariza. He was not the Trevor Ariza that was here the first time before he flew to Houston. So, had he stuck around, and I know he would have definitely made the cap go up. But I think with a younger talent like that, you should definitely invest in someone like Oubre. And look where he's doing now in Golden State.
Yeah, well, when it comes to Trevor Ariza, they let him go, and just immediately they dropped off as a defensive team. Under Randy Whitman, they were a good defensive team. Like, they had John Wall, he was all defense one year. They had Ariza as the wing. They had Nene and Marcin Gortat, and they were a good defensive team. Garrett Temple was coming off the bench. And then as soon as they let Ariza go, they just could never play defense quite like they did with him. The Kelly Oubre deal, I understand why they traded him. Like, I think it had gotten to a point where both sides kind of needed a change and a fresh start. But in hindsight, obviously that deal did not work out. They didn't get much at all for him. They got a rental of Trevor Ariza. Yeah. And then he left, and they had nothing to show for a guy that they picked in the first round and developed into a pretty good player who ended up having success in Phoenix and getting a new contract, and then, of course, getting traded. So those are some of the personnel moves that I think you could point to when you're talking about the mistakes that they made that were their own doing, outside of the injuries that I think were the biggest reason why they kept falling short. But certainly, if John Wall never had his body break down and didn't have all those injuries, then I think they would have probably kept making the playoffs. Now, I don't know how far they would have gone. I don't think they ever would have made the conference finals, but I think they would have continued to be a playoff team for sure.
So yeah, that year where they took, when they took Boston to Game 7. Had hypothetically, had they win that game, how many games did you think they would win against the Cavs?
Oh man, I don't know if it was quite what Bradley Beal said, that they didn't want to see us. But I feel like they would have matched up pretty well. I think they would have won 2 games. I think they could have taken them to 6.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a good Cleveland team. Obviously, they won the title the year before, and they ended up going to the finals and not being able to compete with the Kevin Durant-led Golden State Warriors. But I feel like I don't think the Wizards would have beaten the Cavs, but they would have put up a pretty good fight. I think they would have lost in 6. What do you think? Do you think they would have beaten the Cavaliers?
I think they would have maybe I think I agree, maybe 5 to 6 games. They would probably steal one at home, and then maybe steal one, maybe get lucky in Cleveland. Because at that time, Wall and Beal, they were just clicking. Like that backcourt was unstoppable as far as they're going at ease, especially that Game 6 performance in at Atlanta where they just balled out. Like that was like the coming out. In my opinion, that was like the coming out game for both of them.
That was an amazing game. I think that was probably the best game they played as a duo, considering the stakes, because they both scored a bunch of points. I think they both had over 30 points. But John Wall was just unbelievable in that game. I think he had like 2 or 3 blocks, like 3 or 4 steals, shot a high percentage. Remember was talking trash to like Quavo and Julio Jones courtside. I think Gucci Mane was there.
Yeah.
That was like the peak of John Wall and Bradley Beal. Like that game, I feel like was as good of a game as they ever played together. And it was on that stage. And then they just didn't have enough against Boston. That was a deep Boston team, and the Wizards bench. Even though I feel like in hindsight, it looks better now than it did at the time. You did have Boyan, who turned into a really good player. You did have Kelly Oubre, who turned into a good player. But yeah, I look at that Atlanta Game 6 as kind of like the peak of the Wall Beal era in a way.
Yeah, that was definitely great memories, especially all the trash talking with him and Dennis Schroeder, calling him, calling him explicit languages like on the court. You can just read it. You can
remember Markieff Morris and Paul Millsap with the MMA move back and forth. That was great. That was a fun series to cover. I remember going to the Atlanta Hawks practice at the John Thompson Performance Center and like interviewing Dwight Howard about it, like one-on-one. Paul Millsap and Dennis Schroeder. There was a lot of trash talking going on between those teams.
Yeah, especially Gortat. He was saying, "Oh yeah, when me and Dwight were playing in Orlando, I was just like bodying him in practice." So It was just smack talk, one thing after the other, and yeah, those are great memories as far as like that tenure. So it was fun while it lasted, right?
Yeah, it was. Obviously the timing was tough when they traded John Wall. It was right before this season started. I think everyone was anticipating what he'd look like when he came back. It's almost like Wizards fans were in it with him throughout that whole rehab. And he is just such a beloved player that it was tough to see him go. But I feel like we're starting to see that it was for the best, I think, for both sides. I think John Wall has thrived in Houston, even though their record has really dropped off lately. I think it was good for him to get a change of scenery. And I think for the Wizards, it was good to try something new. You'd had all those years with John Wall and Bradley Beal. Now you're trying something new with Russell Westbrook, and he's still clearly got something left in the tank. So I defended the trade at the time, and I will continue to defend it because I think it might end up being one of those rare deals where it works out for both sides, depending on what happens with that first-round pick that the Wizards gave Houston, of course.
Yeah, and I actually got your back, Chase, because I actually one of the very few that loved that trade. And
right from the start?
Yeah, from the start, because my opinion, I've told my fellow Wizards comrades, like I said, we should have traded John Wall like two years ago, because you were just gonna sit on the contract, and now what you're not getting a good rate of return for your max player. So I think they would have gotten more in return, like maybe a couple more draft picks. And before the severity of his injury, they would have flipped it for at least, maybe a marquee player, maybe like a Russell Westbrook type of player. So we may never know.
Well,
right?
Yeah, we'll never know. And, obviously they had to attach something to get rid of John Wall. There's just so much unknown about how he would look when he came back. But I think to get a guy in Russell Westbrook who had just made All NBA and is playing as well as he is now, I mean, that was a pretty good return for a guy who had ruptured his Achilles and hadn't
Yeah,
seen an NBA court in 2 years.
yeah,
I mean, I thought the Wizards, especially with how much they protected that draft pick, that they did pretty well for themselves. Obviously, the way the season started, it looked like Houston had won that trade, but I think the Wizards have caught up to them in that regard. And right now, I'd say it's probably a push.
exactly. So perfect segue to my next question, Chase. So trading John Wall for Russell Westbrook was the best case scenario for the Wizards organization that they had to do. How much of an impact has Westbrook have at as being the leader slash veteran of the Wizards team?
I think quite a bit. Going into training camp, we heard a lot about how he makes a big difference just setting an energetic tone and with his competitive fire. And we didn't really see that early in the season. And I think in hindsight, it was because he was playing hurt. He just wasn't himself physically, and I don't think he was himself mentally. Once he started to get healthier and started to get to the rim as often as he's used to getting to the rim and making a lot of the Russell Westbrook type plays, like just rebounds out of nowhere, diving on the floor for loose balls. I think those are the types of plays that lead by example and they rub off on other players. And Bradley Beal has said already that he's lifted his game by just bringing it every single night. A lot of the young players, you can tell that they just love playing with Russell Westbrook. Mo Wagner, Denny Avdia just have really nice things to say about him and the leadership he's given them. Rui Hachimura in particular, I think has benefited a lot. They had a meeting before a practice recently where Russell Westbrook made every player on the team describe and explain their roles on the team. And, he told Rui Hachimura in training camp, you're the only guy on this team that can guard 1 through 5. And in that meeting, Rui Hachimura said, I can guard 1 through 5. So Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal have kind of held him to that. And they say it's been a big reason why the team has turned things around, particularly on defense. So you're starting to hear stories like that, more and more stories like that, where Russell Westbrook made an impact on a specific player in a very specific way. And it's exactly why the Wizards wanted to bring him in, is they set this culture moving forward. They feel like he's the perfect guy to kind of set an example for younger players.
Definitely. With Russell Westbrook, I believe, my opinion, he had the Paul Pierce impact, right? Where, he's not as old as Paul Pierce when he came to the Wizards, but just having that swagger that they haven't had in a long time, even before John Wall was healthy, when they were talking a lot of trash. I think that just that veteran leadership and accountability, that just shows that I'm here for a reason, for me to be a leader for you guys, and then however this season will go will define us. And they basically turned it up at the right time, especially that West Coast trip, and and especially with Hachimura, owning up to his promise, saying that I can guard 1 through 5, and that just basically, Westbrook just had like a switch on everyone. Everybody just turned it up a notch, especially when they lost Thomas Bryant. Now you have Robin Lopez, contributing, and even Raul Neto. Like that was a nice surprise too, with Ish Smith like out for a good duration of the season.
Yeah, Raul Neto has been really, really good. The Wizards, if Ish Smith was healthy, you wonder how much he'd be playing, and he's taken this opportunity to really run with it. But Russell Westbrook, I think there's also been an element of guys just learning how to play with him. I think he's such a dominating personality on the floor. He has his spots and he kind of sticks to them, in the mid range or by attacking the rim. He's not a big 3-point shooter, obviously, but he's such a strong personality on the floor that you kind of need to learn where to be and where not to be when you're playing with him. And I think guys understand what he likes to do offensively. They understand when the pass is going to come from him and at what angle. And you're starting to see chemistry build between him and a lot of players on the team. And when it comes to guys like Neto, I think it really shows the Wizards do have some depth. Robin Lopez as well, filling in for Thomas Bryant. That's one thing that stood out to me this year. Early in the season, it was like no one on the team could make shots and no one on the team could get stops. But now it seems like they have quite a few players at a lot of different positions. And it makes it a little interesting, honestly, as you look ahead to the trade deadline, which is March 25th, because what their needs are, you wonder if they need to go outside of the organization to fill their needs. Because like right now, I'd say like 3-point shooting might be a need, but you might think that your 3-point shooting will get better just as Davis Bertans shoots his career average. You know, if Bradley Beal starts getting hot from three, you know, they've got 3-point shooters on their roster. They could try Anthony Gill. You know, he hasn't played much at all. But they've got depth at a bunch of different positions, and it has me wondering kind of like, what do they need as they approach the deadline?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even seeing their names with, you know, with Blake Griffin, you know, opting out from his contract. That's, I mean, it's just, you know, Twitter rumors, but just seeing the Wizards name just being like, you know, being rumored to sign him, and eventually he went to the Nets. Um, it's just like a great fresh of air as far as like what winning does to the organization.
Yeah, that one I could kind of tell you that he wasn't going to sign with the Wizards just because they've never had much luck with the buyout market. And you pretty much got to be one of those top teams, like a top contender. Like when a player like Blake Griffin becomes available, you know, the Wizards might be 10th or 11th in line when it comes to where they're going to sign, because they want to go chase a ring. And the Wizards haven't been able to provide that opportunity for a team in a while, or a player in a while. And even in 2016-17, I remember the buyout went out, and then they ended up getting Brandon Jennings, who was actually pretty good for them. But it was even then when they won 49 games and they were, you know, one of the top 5 seeds in the Eastern Conference. Even then they didn't get like first choosing when it came to the buyout market. So I feel like the Wizards are a long ways away from attracting players like Blake Griffin.
Yeah, hopefully in time, you know, when they build around Bradley Beal and Westbrook and Hachimura, you know, they can be more, you know, accommodating to like bigger names, and, you know, hopefully like their record will speak for itself in due time. All right, so next question for you, Chase. Bradley Beal has emerged as one of the best NBA players in the league and is having a career year. So what will it take for him to remain with the Wizards for the rest of his career?
I think they need to win to a certain extent. You know, they want to keep him for as long as he wants to, for as long as his prime runs out, maybe for the rest of his career. And he wants to stay here and he wants to build with this team, but certainly they're going to have to win more than they've won this year, I think, to keep him happy. He doesn't want to leave and he doesn't want to join a super team. He's made that clear publicly and privately, but he wants to make the playoffs. And I think the Wizards are headed in the right direction right now. Like if they continue on this course, maybe have one more, like if they play 500 the rest of the year, but they have like one more run like they've had recently where they've won 8 of 11, that should get them in the playoffs. And I think that's enough for Bradley Beal this year. You know, maybe next year he wants to take a step forward, but there's a level of patience there, I think, for him. He just wants to be on a good Eastern Conference team that's in the playoff mix. And then from there, you can try to build to become a contender. So I think they need to make the playoffs this year. And as long as they do, then you can table any sort of trade rumors involving him through this coming off season, to be honest. And then we'll see how because certainly I want them to take a step forward the following season. But I think it's just a matter of getting to the playoffs if you want to keep Bradley Beal around.
Yeah, definitely agree. Do you think, Chase, that him being named as an NBA All-Star starter, do you think that also elevated his game this season as well once he found out that he was, you know, like a legit starter for this year?
I think so. I think he was really surprised by that. But I also think that helps the Wizards' cause to try to keep him happy and keep him around long term, because last year when he didn't make the All-Star team or All-NBA, it was pretty obvious that it was because of the Wizards' record. So it was kind of like he had signed up for the long haul with this team, but probably not thinking that it would affect him individually in that way. It's like, okay, well, as long as he can still get his individual accolades and they win 29 games, that's okay, because, you know, it's not affecting him. But then it affected him. So I'm sure he's happier now that, you know, even though they've lost more games than they've won this year, he's getting recognition for his accomplishments, because he should have been an All-Star last year. He probably should have been All-NBA. So that's good. And I think it just was finally affirmation of a lot of hard work for him. You know, it was so surprising, I think, because he had been 9th and 10th among Eastern Conference guards the last 2 years in All-Star fan voting. And now all of a sudden he's one of the most popular players in the NBA. So I think it was a little bit confusing for him. He's got some theories. I have some theories as to why that was the case, but I don't think anyone knows the real right answer. And he's just, you know, not going to complain. He'll take it no matter what the reason is.
Yeah, I mean, especially when John Wall made the NBA All-Star team, where we had Nicki Minaj's help off social media to
Yeah.
bump up his All-Star voting. I think, like I said, like you were saying, like I think it's just how he elevated his game despite being on a bad team and also no exposure, no national exposure. Just seeing his stat line, dropping 30 plus a night and then basically trying to trying to will his way, to win every game. And, at that time, like it was a tough stretch. So now I think with that stretch last month where it really defined like his all-star starter, I think that caught a lot of eyes, especially, you see here, like, inside the NBA, you hear ESPN, mentioning his name, you hear First Take, Undisputed. So I think it's just a matter of him elevating his game at the right time. And that really caused, my opinion, and also like exposure too. Like a lot of players in a lot of cities like LA, New York, Chicago, Florida, they want to support their own team, but when they see good talent like Bradley Beal, they want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and Bradley Beal brought this up himself, and it's a theory of mine. The trade rumors probably helped him in a any publicity is good publicity type of way.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned those markets like LA and New York and Miami. A lot of those fans of those teams were interested in Bradley Beal because they heard their team's name mentioned in the same sentence as him. And all those shows you mentioned talked a lot about him, particularly in the offseason when it came to trade rumors. And I think it caused a lot more people to pay attention to his game. And once they did, they realized that not only is he really good, he plays the game the right way, and he's a fun personality, and he's a good guy. He's got a good he represents himself and the Wizards very well. So I think all of that helped his cause. And certainly being the leading scorer in the NBA didn't hurt. And last year, kind of setting records for the points he was scoring and not being All-Star or All-NBA, all of it drew more attention to Bradley Beal. And the more attention he gets, the more people realize he's a really, really good player. And that was eventually, I think all of it helped him break through from not only it's been tough for him to get all-star fan votes, but it's been tough for Wizards players over time to get all-star fan votes. So for him to be that popular was, I think, really surprising to him, but also to a lot of Wizards fans.
Agreed. Yeah. And now that he's with, I think he was Team Durant. So I'm sure he'll get the green light. He's going to go for that all-star MVP. And I think that's, once he get that, that's just going to elevate his game even more.
He should feel like he can go for it. He's the all-star starter, so the fans want to see him play, and he's the leading scorer in the NBA. Like, don't go in there deferring to anyone else. Take your shots.
There you go.
I feel like Bradley Beal should feel like he's got the green light. Absolutely.
Definitely. All right, Chase. So we're almost towards the end of this. I really appreciate your time. The Washington Wizards have good young pieces, such as Rui Hachimura, Deni Avdija, Troy Brown Jr., Cassius Winston, and even Mo Wagner. What are your expectations for these young players to take the next step in their careers?
Well, I think they're kind of all in different tiers at this point. Rui Hachimura and Deni Avdija would headline that group because they're the most recent first-round picks and were just picked for the Rising Stars roster, which was a pretty cool accomplishment. Rui was a plug-and-play rotation player. I am pretty high on his future. I know some people wish he was a better defensive player or a better shooter, but I feel like he'll develop those things. He's 23, but he's pretty young in terms of basketball years. He didn't start playing until high school. So I think he could be a late bloomer, kind of like a Pascal Siakam. I don't know if he's ever going to be an all-star or all-NBA like Siakam, but I see more upside than a lot of people will give him credit for. Although he's already a good player, consistently gets you 13 points and 5-6 rebounds a night. Deni Avdija, it's been a bit of a roller coaster rookie year for him so far. He started out really, really well. He played his way into the starting lineup, has since lost that job. But I think it's all about the long-term ceiling for him. He turned 20 in January. So you're really looking to see what is he going to be like when he's 23, 24 years old. Maybe it's on his second contract that the Wizards will really find out what they got in him. Because you're betting on the athleticism, the size, the feel for the game, the skills that he already has at his age. It's going to take a while because he's such a well-rounded player to get all those skills, or at least some of them, up to like above average NBA level. So it's going to take time for him. Now, the rest of the guys on the roster, you're wondering who's going to be around next year. Troy Brown Jr., they picked up his contract option for next season, but he's not in the rotation at all. I wonder if he would benefit from a change of scenery, whether it's a trade before the deadline or in the offseason. Maybe they let him go somewhere where he can play more minutes and maybe have more of a playmaking role. Isak Bonga has kind of surprisingly been in and out of the rotation this year. I wonder what his future in the NBA will be, because he's not really developing any specific NBA skills. I mean, he's a pretty good defensive player and analytics like him, but I don't know how many more contracts that's going to get him if that's all he can provide. Mo Wagner, it's interesting. They didn't pick up his contract option for next season. Same thing with Jerome Robinson, but all of a sudden Mo Wagner's in the starting lineup and playing pretty well. So I wonder what his future will be. I think he's playing well enough where he'll get another contract, but obviously with the way things went with the Wizards decision, you wouldn't expect it to happen here. So the Wizards have a pretty good group of young players. Rui and Denny, like I said, highlight that. And I think it's given them a good blend of young and old on their roster, because they've got experienced star players and they've got experienced veterans, and their roster's kind of expensive. But when you have guys like Rui and Denny, then there's still going to be upside to your roster because they're young players on rookie contracts with potential. So as long as they get better, even if you don't add players from the outside, in trades or free agency, your roster can continue to get better from within, because you have players who are cheap, who are ascending, their trajectories trending upwards. So I like how the Wizards have been able to keep their first round picks and continue to replenish their young talent.
Definitely. And, I'm also high on Cassius Winston. Being a Maryland guy, I love the Maryland Terrapins, and, part of them being in the Big Ten, you see Michigan State, where Cassius Winston had his best games against Maryland last season. So I was like, you know what? I hope the Wizards can get him, and they got him with the second pick. I think it was a trade that how they got him. It was just,
well, if you like Cassius Winston this week, I'm gonna have a story I'm pretty excited about. I talked to Tom Izzo for a long time about him. I interviewed Cassius Winston, then I reached out to Michigan State, kind of being like, hey, just so I'm writing this story, I'd love a quote or a statement from Tom Izzo. I didn't even really request an interview, but he loves Cassius Winston so much that next email I got was, here's his cell phone number, call him tonight. So I was on the phone the other night with Tom Izzo.
That's awesome. And you haven't posted the article yet?
No, probably midweek I'll get to that, but awesome. I'm pretty excited about, because he just went on and on and on about Cassius Winston.
Yeah, and he's doing great with the go-go right now. Like, he's putting up
he's playing pretty well. Yeah. He's playing well.
Yeah, and hopefully he can crack the rotation next season. So, all right, Chase, so this is appreciate your time. So, last question for you. Ask me a question.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. So you live in LA, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what I want to have for dinner tonight. Is when you go back to DC, is there a place you always go to, or is there a type of food that you've been hitting up lately that you recommend that I should try?
Okay, so when I go back home, and I'm not sure if I love chicken wings. I'm not sure if you like chicken wings as well.
Oh, of course.
So I'm not sure if you've been around like University of Maryland. I'm sure you've been, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's actually University of Maryland. So there is a chicken wing place called Chase Hughes. I'm not sure. It's off the University Strip, like as far as like near their campus. It's not called it's called the Clucksters now. So they kind of had a rebranding. So every time I go there, it's always,
was Cluck Hughes not PC enough?
it has a distinct taste. It's a funny story. My wife, who was my girlfriend at that time, we ate there. We ate at Cluck Hughes for dinner, and I was going to propose to her. I proposed to her in the parking lot.
Oh wow!
So imagine,
that place
right?
definitely has sentimentality.
Imagine you're full from dinner, eating chicken wings and fries and all the grease, and then your mind is just running like so many things. Like you just want to propose. You're gonna propose to her, and I proposed to her, like, will you marry me? And then she started laughing, and she's like, you would do something like this, like, and like it worked out very well. But yeah, Cluck Hughes is one place I love going.
What do you get when you go there? What type of wing?
Oh, I get like, I'm a spicy guy, so I get like the either the second or the hottest one, which is 911. Like
Wow.
you have to like sign up. I have a very high tendency for spiciness, so
So you could go on hot ones and
I can
just go
go.
all the way
I can
down
go
the
on
line.
hot
You ever
one.
watch that show?
Yeah, I watch it. Like I watched the one with Shaq and like Eldest Alba. I just see like watch. I just enjoy like seeing them like suffer. Uh, but yeah, I think I can make a good run for it. But I think I maybe tap out because I'm not familiar with the sauces. So yeah, I like Cluck Hughes, and then not really familiar with like the new places. Just like your local carryouts, I'm sure you're familiar with like the chicken wings with the mambo sauce and fried rice or French fries. So I'm
Oh
I'm
yeah.
pretty much a comfort food kind of guy. I'm not really as far as like restaurant week or I go to DC for I actually like going to I forgot the Pop Tart place in DC.
Oh, Ted's.
Ted's, yeah, Bulletin Ted's.
Yeah,
Ted's
Ted's
Bulletins.
Bulletin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love going there. So like, I haven't been home. I haven't been home in about 2 years. But last time I actually went to Ted's Bulletin, and my kid loves like their Pop Tarts. So like, I bought like 10 of them before going home, and they were all
Oh
gone.
wow.
Like they were gone before we checked in.
Wow.
He was munching. It's just a great. It's just a distinct taste as far as
Oh, it's so good. It's such a good idea. Good idea too. Like I'm surprised other places don't make them.
yeah. So for dinner, depends. Like, what kind of food are you into?
See, I'm not that picky. So sometimes when I want to eat, figure out what I want to eat, there's just too many options that sound good.
So do you live in like Maryland or Virginia area or DC?
Virginia.
Virginia. If you like, I'm not sure, do you like Korean barbecue?
You know, I've actually never tried Korean barbecue, even though I grew up in Annandale, where like there's a
Oh
lot of
my
Korean barbecue.
goodness. That strip Chase has nothing
What's the
but
best one?
there so there's this one place called Ojigabee. It's off
Huh.
Little River Turnpike. So it's off when you exit off Little River Turnpike, it's just off that strip. It's called OJ. I can I'll message it to you if you want.
Oh, Jigabee, huh?
It's
Interesting.
great. So like I know they've opened up outdoor dining over there in Virginia in the DMV.
Yeah.
So they do have outdoor dining. And the salad is really good. It just has like that. It's just a distinct taste. Like you just gotta try it yourself. And then if you like, beef such as like bulgogi, which is like it's like marinated beef, kind of like stir fry beef, bulgogi.
Hmm.
They also have like chicken. Chicken takes longer to cook. If you're in the pork,
They have like Korean fried chicken,
they
like
I think
banchan style.
yeah, I think they do serve. I'm not sure they do serve it, but I know like there's a couple of strips around there. If you like banchan, that's a good move too. It
Oh,
just
it's unbelievable.
you just gotta wait a while. Like is it like 30, 45 minutes as far
Oh
as
yeah,
like,
because they gotta fry it like 3 times.
yeah, you got fired like 3 times and then like you get it, like you're burning your tongue because it's so hot. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So if you want to do carry out, or if you eat pho, do you like eating pho?
All of the above, man.
Oh man,
Love
there
it.
you go. So I mean, the cold weather, like I'm sure it's pretty cold over there right now in Virginia.
Yeah.
What would be actually a good move, especially like you just worked a pretty long shift last night. You want to get some grease going on, get some good comfort food because you got a long weekend ahead of you. So I think comfort food such as like bonchon chicken will be good, and then get some fries.
Yeah,
Watch some
maybe I'll go.
goat.
Maybe I'll go to Cluckster's one of these days.
Oh
If
man,
if if Maryland was playing games where like fans could go, I would have gone to like 3 or 4 games already this year.
yeah.
And next time I go to one, I'll have to go to Cluckster's.
Cloaksters, yeah, it's off University Boulevard, I believe. Yeah, off University Boulevard. I think it used to be next to. Well, yeah, it's right across the campus. So
Cool.
definitely a great spot. I highly recommend it. All right, so that wraps it up with episode 26 with Chase Hughes. Thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to talk to you again. Hopefully, but hopefully for playoffs.
Absolutely, man. Let's do it again. Maybe next time I can meet RJ Machismo.
All right, thank you so much, guys.